Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. I sort of flew through that a little fast, but yeah. Anyways, today we are drawing Blanka from Street Fighter. And my voice is a little hoarse, so we're probably not going to be doing a huge amount of talking, or at least I'll try to minimize some of it for the sake of getting through this. But yeah, so we're going to be talking a little bit about lighting today. I'll have a bit more to talk about that later, because that's more of a shading problem when it comes to lighting, as one would usually expect. God, I'm really full of beans today, aren't I, with the energy on this. This should probably be an easy one, because Blanka doesn't really wear clothes, so that will make parts of this easier. Parts of it harder, because Blanka is also very hairy. So we'll see. I will roll the intro to get this weird intro over with. So yeah, anyways, I'll roll the intro. Moving on. Okay, so this is what we've got. As I mentioned, well, I didn't mention it actually. There's some adjustments that I've got to make. I'm introducing this now for the first time. So yeah, his hair is a little big. It's a little bigger than it probably should be. His hair should probably be about here, maybe, in terms of height. Something around there. It shouldn't be this high, that much is for certain. Believe it or not, I did actually already adjust it. It was taller than this. But yeah, I've chosen to shrink it a little bit. For some reason I decided in my base sketch to include some of the lightning. This is not what the lightning's going to look like. It'll probably look a little better than that, because currently it doesn't look very good at all. So yeah. Does Blanka normally have something on his wrists? I feel like he does. I feel like normally he has like wrist braces, the same way he does his little anklets. But in all the reference images I'm not seeing it, so I guess he doesn't have any wrist braces. I guess it's just the anklets. I'll have to put a chain on those, but I might just use my chain brush for that, because I do have a chain brush. Just to make my life a little easier. Because some of this stuff is just a bit of a pain. So something which I decided to do in terms of the design, which is a slight change, is that I made his limbs a little bit different in terms of their proportioning. So he is partly sort of in a big hunched in pose like this, so things like his shoulders are going to seem a lot bigger. But his actual shoulders are really big, as you can see here. The tops of his arms, as they sort of transition from the shoulders, very bulky and thick. I made his forearms kind of chunky as well, and his arms themselves are quite long, because I've decided to go for something a bit more gorilla-ish in terms of his proportions, because that's something which they tend to go for with Blanka's design. So that's sort of just kind of going with what they normally do. Yeah, they normally make Blanka a bit more kind of gorilla-ish. He's got that sort of thing going on of where, yeah, he's got a bit of a kind of an ape-like physique. Like, yeah, as I say, like this sort of gorilla thing where he got very long arms, big long upper body, kind of short legs. His legs aren't quite so short here. I've given him more normal human legs, but just sort of longer arms. And again, it looks fine, because we're doing a pose in which that's not super... it's partly emphasized that as part of the pose, but we're not seeing him like stood up straight, where he's got his weird long arms. Because, yeah, that would look very strange. So, yeah, things like his face, I'm going to need to maybe reduce some of the lines on this, because I've gone a bit line crazy on some parts of this. Sometimes Blanka has very defined sort of blue eyes, but I've gone for a little dot eyes, because that makes him look a little crazier. He's got a bit of a weird mouth position, of where he's kind of like that. It's sort of flaring out a little bit. And as such, this eye should be slightly more squinted, but it's a bit crazier. So we'll see. I might reduce the size of that eye a little bit, because it should be, if his mouth is open like that, it should be squinting a little bit more. But yeah, this was a bit of a hastily done base sketch. So his hands, I didn't really feel like drawing his hands, so I hunched his hands in so that you can't really see them. Plus, that sort of fits the gorilla thing a little bit more. But yeah, for the most part, this shouldn't be too hard in terms of a base, or in terms of detailing. because he's very thick and bulky, but a lot of that musculature I don't have to worry too much about because a lot of that's sort of pre-done for me. So elements of that won't be too bad. What was I going to mention? The yeah, his sort of proportioning and things like that, it's already pre-done, so that's not much to worry about. I will have to reduce the size of his hair. That's a big adjustment I need to make. But yeah, largely a lot of like our lighting stuff, that's nothing I have to worry about yet. I don't have to worry about that until later. Yeah, like all the lightning and all the lighting and all that stuff, that's later's problem. So yeah, something which I will try and do, which this will obviously be later, is I want to have some of the lightning sort of coil around his arms a little bit, like over his, like sort of roll over his shoulders a little bit, because that might look cool. But we'll see. We'll see how that works, because that will make a more complex lighting environment, which maybe I don't want to do. So we'll see how that works. Is there anything I really need to introduce more with these details? I don't think so. Blanka is very simple in terms of his design. The colors, I'll have to think about those later, because Blanka has a few different sort of color palettes that he tends to have. So I'll see which I feel like doing more later. But yeah, so yeah, I think I'll just sort of carry on. I think I'll just begin, I'll do these details, and then I'll be back to do the colors where some changes will happen. Again, we'll see. I'll probably do the lightning as part of the colors section, so that you'll see more of that there. And especially with the colors, again, we'll have some decisions to make with them. So yeah, I'll reduce the size of his hair. I'll sort of try and emphasize some more of this musculature a little bit more. Reduce some of those lines in his face because there's a little bit too much going on there, as you can see. It's supposed to be an intense expression, but this is just a little much. But yeah, I might maybe talk a little bit more about the expression later on, because I feel like there's some thoughts I have on that, but I don't really want to bog down our intro too much with them. I mean, really, what is it that I was going to bring up? I mean, yeah, I already talked about the sort of like the kind of the big sort of expression there, but there's things like obviously the lines in his face which definitely need to be reduced. I've given him, one of the things which I suppose I should mention is that I've given Blanka a sort of very big face, which is how he's often sort of depicted. He's got a very sort of big, kind of thick face. That's the best way of describing it, where he's got sort of a very big pronounced bottom lip of where it sort of protrudes a little bit. Again, this is more of the sort of, I don't know what they're going for with that, but where he's got like a very kind of wide jaw and a very long kind of bottom lip and a very thick nose. So that's the sort of features that I've gone for here. He's got a very thick sort of downturned flat nose and a very broad jaw and big lip. But yeah, that's the sort of stuff I've tried to emphasize. The sort of side of the brow kind of is very thick and pronounced because he's got quite a far forward brow. Maybe they're going for a sort of a Neanderthal thing. Maybe that's what they're going for. But yeah, I'll have to try and figure out what I'm doing with this hair, is the big one. But yeah, I suppose I said everything I meant to say with the expression. But yeah, I will do these details and then I'll be back to do the colors. So yeah. Right, that is our details done. So that took a little bit. Not as long as it usually takes, but we are rapidly losing light. I did start a little bit later in the day, mostly because of the aforementioned hoarse throat. So I didn't want to do this too early, because, yeah, my throat has sort of recovered a little bit as time has gone on. So I'll be able to talk a little bit more. So one of the things which I wanted to talk about before, which I sort of truncated for time, was that in terms of Blanka designs, Blanka's got very few of them in terms of sort of core main designs. So I've gone for the classic Blanka. However, like again, classic Blanka is Blanka from Street Fighter 2 all the way up until Street Fighter 5. Like Street Fighter 5, there's a slight difference in Blanka's design. He's hairier. That's really the only difference. Is his arms and legs and head and chest are all much hairier. He's got much more pronounced sort of claws. The fingernails and toenails are much longer and thicker, which he doesn't really have in the classic design. They're sort of pointed, which I haven't really done here. I added in the toenails because they weren't there before. I had forgotten to do it in the base sketch. But I didn't emphasize them because I didn't feel it was necessary to emphasize them as pointed or anything like that. So I chose to just sort of keep them more human in shape. And yeah, then obviously Street Fighter 6, he's got a very different haircut, he's got the dungarees and all this stuff, so he's a lot different looking in that. But here I've gone for sort of more classic Blanka because we're going for something a bit more animalistic in terms of the posing and all this stuff, so it feels like more logical in that sense to go for classic Blanka. And plus a lot of the characters, Street Fighter characters that I've been drawing recently, I've been doing them in classic designs, so it makes sense to sort of keep up that theming for a little bit at the very least. So I fixed the hair. I'm more happy with the hair now. It's in more of these sort of pronounced little points that come out into all these different shapes. And it's shorter, but it sort of bunches out and sort of flies out at the back a little bit. You can see here it all kind of falls down at the back. So originally with the base sketch, what I was trying to do is to sort of have it more of a sort of uniform shape so that it doesn't look... It does look kind of weird the way it falls down at the back, but that's just sort of how it's going to look. That was originally why I made it so much bigger, because if it was much bigger and it sort of fell into this sort of uniform shape, it wouldn't look weird the way that it fell down at the back, but that just meant that his hair wasn't the right shape. It wasn't the right shape at all. And so I decided to change that here. I sort of emphasized some of the facial expression a little bit. I narrowed this eye because that makes more sense, because the way that the mouth is open here, that should narrow that eye, because whenever you open your mouth like this, the eye naturally sort of squints a little bit. So that's what I've done here, is that his eyes are still wide, but this one's slightly more squinty. And so that's what I've done there. I sort of lowered some of the detailing on his face just so that he doesn't look quite so haggard and scary. But yeah, I gave him a bit more of a sort of a dumpy physique. Like he's got quite a sort of a thick and sort of svelte body shape. He's got a fairly sort of thick torso. He's got a bit of a gut going on. He's still got abs, so I suppose you can't fault him for that. But yeah, I gave him a fairly sort of chunky torso, because I feel like that adds a little something to his sort of big, burly kind of body. And so yeah, color-wise, I think I'll be going for something which isn't quite as yellowy green as the classic Blanka, but isn't quite as bluey green as the more modern ones. I think maybe I might go for something more in terms of like his Street Fighter 6 skin tone. His skin tone in that is more of maybe what I want to go for, of where it's a sort of a median shade. It's not quite so dark, but it's also not quite so bright. Because I feel like his skin tone in Street Fighter 5 it looks very painted, is how I would describe it. It doesn't look like a skin tone so much as it does body paint. And it is supposed to be his skin, so that's the thing. I don't think it should look like it's been painted on. So I want to go for something which isn't quite that deep a shade of green, something which is a little bit more mild. His hair will obviously still be very ginger, because it has to be, for the contrast. But our color palette here is probably going to wind up being very sort of yellowy because of the lightning, because the lightning will be a yellowy color. That will sort of yellow out a lot of our shades. So again, all of his colors are compatible with yellow, so that shouldn't cause any problems. But yeah, I don't want to end up creating a situation where it's just not quite right. So we'll see what I do, because I've already got a sort of a base sketch for my lightning, but that's not really what I'm going to follow at all. I'll maybe use it for the start, just, well, not even, I don't need to use it for that, because I'll probably do something kind of like what I did with the storm drawing not too long ago, of where there's very sort of thick bits of lightning that I'm going to be putting in, and then having those then thin out as they go. But they start quite thick at the ends up here, and then they sort of thin out as they come down. But I'll be doing the lightning as part of this section anyways, as part of these colors. The colors shouldn't take too long because he's not got many going on. He is a Street Fighter character, and Street Fighter characters tend to not have many colors. They are, at the end of the day, I would usually say Street Fighter characters are like cartoon characters in that sense, where they don't have many colors. They're fairly simple because they're designed to be drawn and redrawn and redrawn and redrawn. Especially these classic designs, they are designed to be simple because they have to be drawn multiple times because it's all hand animated. It was at the time anyways. But yeah, so what I will do is I will do these colors. I will, and whenever I'm back, I'll have to talk a lot more about the lighting stuff, because, you know, we've got things like that to do. Because that is supposed to be the point of this whole thing, is lighting. So we'll have a lot of lighting to do. Speaking of which, we are rapidly losing light, so by the time that I come back, I will probably have lights on in here. So yeah, anyways, I'll move on. I'll do these colors, and then I'll be back to do the painted shading, during which time I will probably talk a lot more about the lighting. Yeah, is there anything else I needed to say? I don't think so. His feet are a bit of a weird shape, but that's fine. No one really looks at that, well, aside from those people. But yeah. Yeah, I think I'm good. I sort of thinned out a lot of the lines on the hair because, again, it's supposed to be light, but yeah, anyways. I'll move on. I'll do these colors, and then I'll be back to do the painted shading. So yeah. Alright, so that is our colours done. I did all the lightning and everything. I gave the lightning a slightly greenier hue to the yellow. It is still very much yellow, but I decided to give it a slightly greenier hue. I was originally debating making the trunks a different colour. I was going to make them a sort of more of a grey-brown, but I chose to go for the more sort of traditional brown. Because that feels more, it makes more sense at the end of the day. Just to sort of stick with the classic colors, more so. So yeah, so now we need to talk about the lighting, which, you know, given that that is our central subject, it's funny that we haven't really touched on it all that much so far. So now that I've done the lightning, you can sort of get an idea of where our lighting is going to be going. I had some of the lightning wrap up around his shoulders and sort of roll around his arms a little bit, because I think that looks cool. But what we're going to be doing, lighting-wise, is because all our lightning is surrounding him like this, what we're going to do is we're going to have the lighter parts be on the outside, which is normally not what I would do. I would normally do the darkest part would usually be like on, say, the right, and then the lightest part would be on the left. Just something so that it's simple, so that it's easy and simple, and it creates some sort of more normal shadows and stuff like that. But what we're going to do here today is we are going to go for the outside. Generally just the outside being where the lighting is, and then the inside of him is going to be where all of the dark is. And so that actually, for this pose, that actually works quite well, because he's hunching in. That means most of this here, this zone here in the middle, is just going to be total shadow, pretty much. It's not going to be like deep black shadows, because I don't usually do shadows that dark, but they're going to be dark nonetheless. So yeah, that means the sort of middle of the face is going to be dark, and then the edges are going to be bright. The eyes and teeth I'm probably not going to touch. Well, I'll probably go at that stuff whenever I get to the detailed shading, so there's nothing to worry about for right now. The painted shading will just be a sort of to lay in the general foundation of our shading, or our lighting, I mean to say. So again, I'm going to be using a sort of a yellowy color for the outside, and I think a brown kind of color, or an orange is maybe what my color palette is. I already selected one. Yes. So our lightest color is a sort of a greeny yellow, and our darkest color is a sort of an orange color. So yeah, okay, that's what we're going to be going for. Right, okay. So for the most part, that should be alright. Shouldn't be too challenging. You'll see what I mean as I'm going. So, something which I meant to mention is I tried a few different things with the lightning. I decided to sort of incorporate these little spoking, tiny little lines coiling around some of the bigger bits of lightning, just because I think it adds a little bit of something to it, adds a little bit of volume to it. It's something that will get sort of lost after our gradient maps go on and everything like that. That'll sort of dampen that effect quite a bit. So it's something that will just sort of get a bit more faded as things go along. But I think it's a neat effect. Generally speaking, I suppose, something which I didn't mention in the details, but something that's sort of relevant, is that I've gone for some just generally much rougher lines on this one. I've still given him the sort of big, thick, dark outline, which I've been doing a lot recently, is darkening the outer lines, and then the inner lines can be as thin as I need them to be. But the lines at the very edge of the character are usually quite dark. It's just the same, even like you can see on the shoulders here, these are darker lines than the inside chest lines, even though they're still stretching. And it still connects back here. I've just decided to go for these different line shapes. But here, a lot of the lines are quite rough. As you can see, there's a sort of a bit of a kind of a messiness to the edges of some of these lines. They're a little bit kind of duddy in parts. And so it's just something a little different that I tried. I don't know if I'll keep doing it. Some of it comes down to the fact that the nib on this pen is quite worn down, so it's giving me some sort of messier looking lines. But yeah, it's the type of thing which is just sort of, yeah, it's partly a byproduct of my hardware, and it's also something that I'm sort of kind of going for at the same time, just to see, does it look any good. But I think it looks alright, so we'll stick with it for now. But yeah, so we'll do this painted shading, which, so yeah, as I mentioned, I'll be laying in the sort of general foundations of a lot of our lighting, and then I'll come back with the detailed shading and the gradient maps and all that stuff. And that'll be how we will sort of lay in those more sort of fine ends to things, the finer details. But yeah, so I will do this painted shading, and I'll be back for all that. So yeah. Alright, that's our painted shading done. So, as I mentioned, this is the general idea of what we're going for with our lighting environment. We got something very intense going on. Again, I try to keep things in such a way where it would add some depth. So again, there's some light coming in behind the arms that adds a little bit of depth to the light. And I mean, given how sort of bright the lighting environment is, there would sort of be a little bit of light coming in underneath the arms, maybe not quite that much. I think I'm probably going to go over all of this with the darker shading color here anyways, so we will see how that looks in the end. But yeah, for the most part, this is actually exactly what I'm looking for. There's a few areas which will probably get darker, i.e. the sort of connecting area from the hair down to the face. That will probably get a little bit darker. Yeah, but yeah, for the most part, this is I mean what we wanted with our shading. Again, sort of the edges nice and bright, the interior, the center, where all the dark parts are. So again, I'm not going to go too crazy with the detailed shading here. I'm just going to try and emphasize what we've already got. So realistically speaking, this won't be too crazy. I've already got a color palette selected and everything like that, so I already talked about that to a degree. But yeah, this is going to get significantly more yellow, probably, by the end. So without further ado, I will probably just continue. I will do these detailed shading. The light line, which will be probably kind of subtle this time, because I only want to really just sort of emphasize the very edges and only in little areas, because otherwise it'll start conflicting a little bit too much with the lightning, because that wraps around him a little bit. So I'll probably keep that fairly subtle, all in all. The light line, so that won't be too much to really worry about. Then there is our gradient maps, so we'll do the first one of those as well, and then I'll wrap up. So yeah, I'll do that. Alright, that's our detailed shading, our light line, and our first gradient map done. So with the detailed shading, I'll turn off the gradient map for the purposes of just explaining some stuff. So yeah, for the detailed shading, I kept it fairly subtle. I mean, it comes together in a sort of in a more obvious way after it's obviously applied, but yeah, it's subtle enough as these things go. So as I said before, it's only really just to emphasize what we already did with our painted shading. Our light line doesn't do much. It just sort of applies a nice little bit of a little bit of light along the very edge. Again, a little bit of whitening to the edge of it, just to sort of again emphasize the sort of shape of things. And our gradient map, I was tinkering around between going for a soft light layer and an overlay layer. Because the overlay, let me just show you for the example, it's very high contrast, but it's a little it's a little sort of oversaturated for my tastes. It looks a little deep fried, so I don't really want to go for that. So instead of going for the soft light, just have a high opacity, because we're going to be doing some stuff with our next gradient maps, which I'll start making now, to increase that contrast. So let's go for luminosity, which will have 40%, no, turn down further than that, 30%. And I'll just increase our contrast. We'll put that below or above. Below seems to be darker. Make a duplicate of that. Let's put this above. Let's make that color burn. This will very much increase our contrast, so we're only going to want 10% of this. And then maybe have a look at something else. What was the other ones which I've been using recently? I've been using a lot of lighten layers. I don't really want a lighten layer on this. If I do a multiply layer, that's not quite enough. What about darken layer? No. Multiply. What about multiply at a higher opacity? That's a little not really what I want. Let's you know, why don't we go for multiply just at a very low opacity? Just let it add a little something something. Increases our opacity, or our depth a little bit more of our colors. 15%. Because we do want something that will just sort of bring out our colors a little bit more here. And especially given that we've gone through all this effort to create a very intense lighting environment, we want it to be shown as such. So, yeah, right, okay, that is that. That is our grading maps done. So now I'm going to grab my texture and throw that over the top. Probably going to want the texture to be a pretty low opacity on this, I would say. Because we want it to not get too strong on things. So let's leave it at 10% and let me have a look at it. Because the texture has a habit of sort of colliding with some of this stuff, and we don't want it to sort of wash certain things out. So what I might do is I might increase the glow on our lightning, because it's sort of not all that present anymore. Like, yeah, it's really been washed out by our gradient maps. It's not quite spreading enough. Usually the texture helps with that a little bit, so I'll bring the texture up to about 15%. So that'll help with the glow a little bit. Yeah. So now I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to increase our outer glow a little bit. I don't think there's much I can do. I think that's how it's going to look. I think that's what we've got. So, that is basically us then. Yeah, we've lost a little bit of the glow, but I think it's actually fine. Ultimately, I do think it's a tiny bit deep fried, but that is sort of just the lighting environment we've created for ourselves here, isn't it? We've just created a very intense lighting environment in such a way that it does sort of, again, overdo it in certain areas. It creates these sort of, again, very harsh shadows like this and things like that, where it's created these sort of very deep shadows on the inside of the chest and on the inside of everything here. And the outside is very bright. It's very, very sort of yellowed, the edges of him. But again, that's kind of what I want. This is, I mean, remarkably kind of color-wise, it's very similar to what we did with Storm. I might have actually used the same color palette, now that I think about it. But this is much greener. I'll have a compare of them afterwards, and I'll have to think about it. I don't think they're that similar. It's the sort of same idea with the yellow lightning and the sort of dark background, but this is sort of the thing. Generally speaking, whenever I go for something which is more of a lighting showcase, it tends to be very similar to a lot of the other lighting episodes, of where things are just sort of designed to emphasize the lighting setup very clearly, and so that just means a dark background, high contrast lights. That's sort of generally what I do with these, with the lighting focused episodes, is that they tend to be more focused on they tend to be more focused on, what am I trying to say? They tend to be more focused on the sort of contrast of how lighting is created. Because again, that's generally, in my experience at least, that's how you emphasize a lighting environment, is that you use contrast. That's what lighting is at the end of the day. That's how you showcase different lighting environments, is with contrast. Because again, if there's no contrast, then there's no lighting, really. Then the lighting doesn't work correctly. If there's not a strong contrast, then you're not really seeing a very intense lighting setup. At least not intense enough of one where I don't know if I'm saying this right. At least not enough of an intense lighting environment to really show what you're doing. Because this is the thing. You can do a very technically impressive lighting showcase of very soft lighting. You can do that. It's a thing that a lot of people do. But for me, at least, in my experience here, I find that you need to create a very intense lighting setup to just showcase what you're doing. Because you can apply these same principles of all the things that I've done here to a more subtle lighting environment, and that will work just the same. But that's not the point of what we're doing here. We're doing a very intense lighting setup, and therefore, it has to be intense in order to show what I'm doing, because that is the purpose of it. But yeah, I think my voice is starting to go a little bit, so I think I will probably call it there. So yeah, this was a fun one, all in all. I wasn't expecting this to come out quite as well as it did, to be perfectly honest, because I felt like the base sketch was a little funny in parts, but yeah, I think overall it actually came out quite well. I'm quite happy with this. After all those adjustments and changes, I think it actually works. So yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with this. But yeah, yeah. I think I'll just wrap up and then that'll do that. So, if you liked the video, do whatever it is that you'd normally do, whether that be liking or not. I would, of course, prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that, so all I can do is politely suggest it, which I believe I have done. It's the same deal if you would like to subscribe. I would, of course, prefer that. You can do that. You know where the subscribe button is. You've presumably seen a YouTube video before, so I don't need to tell you where that is. It's below the video. I didn't have to tell you that, but I felt a bit like being polite, so I did. If you have a suggestion for you'd like to see me draw in the future, you could leave a comment. I'd like it if you did that, but be polite about it. If you're not gonna be polite, just don't do it. I don't want to have to read that. If you're not gonna be polite about it, that is. If you are gonna be polite, please do. Go for it. I would like to hear suggestions. Sometimes I mean I have a very extensive list of things that I want to draw in the future, but suggestions would be nice. And yeah, if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. So with all that said, that is us. I will say goodbye and I will leave you. So, bye-bye.